Efendim, Katastrofik Riskleri Yönetmede Reasüransın Katkısı panelimizin üst başlığı. Panelimizin moderatörlüğü Türkiye Sigorta Birliği Yönetim Kurulu Üyesi Sayın Utku Özdemir yapacak. Utku Bey buyurun. Utku Bey salonda mı? Utku Bey buyurun. Ama oraya saklanıyorsunuz. Hoş geldiniz. Durun efendim, alayım sizi. Utku Bey yok.
Geldim geri.
Evet, Reasürans Türkiye ve İberya Bölgesi Hayat ve Sağlık Bölüm Başkanı Sayın Marc Hartenbach. Marc, tamam. Reasürans Türkiye Mal ve Kaza Sigortaları Bölüm Başkanı Sayın Arnold Kap.
Arnold çevrimiçi.
Online mi? Peki. Sayın Kap online. Özbekistan Sigorta Birliği'nin kurucu üyesi ve başkanı Sayın Oybek Kalilov. Alyans Deprem Araştırma ve Geliştirme Bölüm Başkanı Nikola Kordana. O da mı online?
Hay.
Efendim, sahne sizin, konuşma sizin. Buyurun.
Teşekkürler. She's not seeing me. Herkese iyi akşamlar. Yani bu saate kadar kalmış olduğunuz için bir kere öncelikle teşekkür ederim katılımcılar adına. Bu kadar kişinin kalacağını açıkçası beklemiyordum. Benim ismim Utku Özdemir. Milli Reasürans Türk Anonim Şirketi'nin genel müdürüyüm. Şirketimiz biliyorsunuz ama 1929 yılından beri 94 yıldır tam Türkiye sigorta piyasasına büyük bir gururla, mutlulukla, coşkuyla, enerjiyle reasürans teminatı sağlayan bir şirket. Dileğimiz o ki, umudumuz o ki hem Cumhuriyetimizin hem de şirketimizin 2. yüzyılında aynı coşkuyla, aynı başarıyla ve istikrarla piyasamıza reasürans desteği sağlamaya devam edebilelim. Bugünkü panelimizin konusu yani oldukça ilginç çünkü yaşadığımız günler, içinden geçtiğimiz günler açısından çok önem arz eden bir konu. Zaten sabah oturumunda, açılış konuşmalarında daha doğrusu çok yoğun bir şekilde reasüransın öneminin altı çizildi bütün yöneticilerimiz tarafından. Tabii reasürans olmaksızın sürdürülebilir, sağlıklı bir sigorta ekosistemi kurmak mümkün değil. Bu bağlamda da umarım bugünkü yapılacak değerlendirmeleri değerli bulursunuz. Şimdi bu toplantımızın formatı şöyle olacak. Ben daha sonra konuklarımız yabancı olduğu için İngilizceye geçeceğim mecburen. Dilim döndüğünce İngilizce devam edeceğim. Oybek Halilov Bey bize bir sunum yapacak. Kendisini tanıtacağım birazdan. Arkasından Marc ve Arno birlikte bir sunum yapacaklar. Arkasından Nikola bir sunum yapacak. Sonra ikinci bir turumuz olacak. En sonunda da sorularınız olacağını tahmin ettiğimiz için tabii zaman ne kadar el verirse ama mümkün olduğunca hani sorularınızın yanıt bulabileceğini umduğumuz bir soru cevap bölümü olacak. Okay, so welcome everyone. So as at the beginning of in the morning, all the panelists and a lot of speakers stressed, underlined the importance of reinsurance for the Turkish market. As Turkish insurance professionals, we are very much concentrated on our own issues. So I think your presentations will also have a great emphasis on the Turkish aspect of catastrophic risks and the reinsurance. But before diving into our own issues and our own problems, maybe we can have an insight from a different market or a different region, where Oybek will give us his insight about the Central Asian markets. Oybek Halilov is a very experienced insurance professional. He has more than 30 years of international and Central Asian insurance experience. He's the CEO of Mosaic Insurance Group. And he is the founding member of the chairman of Insurance Association of Uzbekistan, and he led the development of new law on insurance activities, I think, which is very important, and he likes to mention that as well. Yes. So, Oybek, before we dive into our own problems of Turkey, what would you like to say about the Central Asian insurance markets to us?
Thank you. I think I would probably give a perspective of how the smaller markets can participate in the larger market and support with a small capacity, which is growing. Most important, Uzbekistan as a country is very close to Turkey. We have historical roots, and just before I start, I want to update on what's happening in Uzbekistan. So in the last 8 years, the country has been growing really fast, and as today, we have in 2022, the country had 80 billion US dollar GDP and the growth of 5% in the 6 months. What most important is country is growing from being small and frontier market to becoming one of the leaders in Central Asia. And we have a population of 35 million, but the most important is that it's a quite young population. The median age is 27%. And tourism is growing in Uzbekistan. We have 8 million tourists last year, but the most importantly, as I mentioned last year, Turkey is one of the key partners for the country and one of the largest investors. As of today, it's the third largest investor in the country. We have significant projects where the major industrial groups from Turkey are involved, and especially in the power generation, industrial, construction, and infrastructure projects. As far as the economy is concerned, it's still driven by industry and following by agriculture. But what was pleasing, insurance and financial services is the second fastest growing sector in Uzbekistan after IT. And that shows also the importance which the government brings to Uzbekistan. We have recently regulator even changed the name to the National Agency for Prospective Projects. So for the government, insurance is a prospective project. And I would like to give just a sense of why small markets could be useful for larger markets and how they can make an input in terms of a capacity. So first of all, industry is growing really fast. Before pandemic, the average growth rate was at 50%. And only during pandemic, it was a 6% decrease. But right after, we have 2 years in a row growing with 67 and 68%. In terms of the composition of the premiums, what have significantly changed from the past 7 years ago, we now have a significant growth in the voluntary types of insurance, and mandatory is reducing. And all that growth, of course, comes with the growth of the whole industry. And what I wanted to show that assets of insurance companies in Uzbekistan has increased by 6 times during those reform periods. And even compared to the last year, we have grown by more than 40%. In terms of the business, it's still driven by property insurance. Second largest line of business is credit insurance, and then followed by vehicle insurance in the other lines. But just wanted to give a real good flavor of who are the players so we can understand who can be partners in the Turkish market in the future and who participants on the reinsurance side. So the largest top 10 companies in Uzbekistan, they've grown by 76% in 2022. And if we look at the leaders of insurance market, the most of the growth came from writing foreign inward reinsurance. And specifically, if we look, the top player increased from 12.3 7% to 19.7% growth. Also, in the last 6 months, I mean, the graph on the right shows that in the last 6 months, 16 companies already written 90% of the risks in Uzbekistan. So what we see is the top companies are growing significantly, and that also shows in terms of the capitalization of the companies. We have, at the moment, the capital requirement is $3 million. The new requirements have not been established, but even without a specific instructions from the government, insurance companies already started increasing their capitals. And just for the sake of a better understanding, I've qualified insurance companies by companies more than 5.5 million, and companies at 5.5 million, and the companies at 4 million, and companies less than $4 million. Because as you can see, most of the companies already above 4 million level, and especially it's important to mention that at the highest level, those with the capital of close to $20 million, we already have the top 3 players, and they keep increasing the capital. What also has changed in terms of the players, if Uzbekistan was previously driven by state-owned insurance companies and 70% of the market was driven by the state companies, today they have less than 12%, and the private insurance companies are growing really fast. So in terms of the capital increase, what we can see that in 21, capitals increased by 17%, and same pace we had in 2022. And again, I repeat, this is all done voluntarily. There were no special instructions from the government. It's just because the market is growing, the capitals of insurance companies is growing as well. In terms of the liabilities, we can also say that the liabilities in many ways is growing with the same pace as the premium growth. So we had the 69% growth in 2022. And also what we can see is the companies at the top of that list are the ones who are involved more with the reinsurance activities, and that's why we see higher growth in terms of liabilities. And the same companies, the trend would continue in terms of the reserves. Again, I'm pleased to say that the assets of insurance companies significantly increased, first of all, due to the reserve increase, and as what we see is the comparison of the insurers' portion in the reserves still remains around a quarter of the reserves as reinsurers. The rest is local. And again, here is the trend that we had 43% growth in 21 and 62% growth in reserves in 31. What I'm trying to say by this, so insurance companies in Uzbekistan are getting richer, they're getting better capitalized, they have international ratings. We have now 8 insurance companies with international rating. And that brings me to this slide, which I think is very important. I mean, for the sake of being politically correct, I would mention, but everybody understands that the Russian market, the reasons why the Russian market as a reinsurance market, as alternative reinsurance market disappeared. And all the capacity which previously used to be placed in Russia now finding its way towards Central Asia, particularly 3 countries, and that's Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan, because in those 3 countries we have plenty of insurers with international rating, and that alternative capacity was, of course, it needs a rating, and it was coming towards us. So that was one of the main reasons in last year why we had a significant increase in terms of the premium volume. Just a quick comparison, and Uzbekistan, I think last year when I've shown before pandemic and during pandemic was at 0.4% penetration, and 21 it increased to 0.5% penetration. Now it's going to 0.7. In fact, at the 6 months of this year, we've seen that it went even further up. Also, what's pleasing to say that in Central Asia, Uzbekistan market wasn't one of the major players, but we see like very quickly catching up with the other larger countries, and now it's at the level of $500 million. So at the end, I just would like to say the main message. So the main message is that Uzbekistan insurance market, as well as the other neighboring countries in Central Asia, they're growing really fast, exponentially. And if today we can offer reinsurance capacity around 20 million, in the next 6 months that capacity can significantly increase even up to 100 million. Compared to the global capacity that may not be a large amount. But what is important is that regionally, and I think this is what has been discussed here, is also global markets are hardening faster than our regional markets. And the global markets already been more difficult to reach for us because of the rate requirements. The capacity which can be offered at the mandatory level or the primary level, that's the one which exists in the region, and that's the one which we can utilize. And I've also shown specifically that these 3 countries can offer that capacity. Now, as an example, some companies in Uzbekistan participated in the catastrophic treaties of the private sector. Specifically, my company have also participated in the Anadolu Sigorta's catastrophic treaty. And we've, of course, learned some lessons. I mean, when in January we've seen the risk, we were so overwhelmed and happy, and we didn't expect that, you know, the big claims gonna hit us, but they did, and it was a good lesson. So what I think is the most important, and what we've learned in many ways, it is the lesson learned not specifically related to Turkey. I can say it's related to all our countries, because the issues may be even worse in Central Asian states in terms of the building codes, in terms of the qualities of construction. I say even more in terms of construction of our local municipalities, when they show on paper that building of one standard, but on the reality we find it was a different. We also have a big issue with rates, rates at the per mil level, and what we have learned, for example, when we've seen the proposed treaties of Turkish market, we thought, oh, that's 10 times more than what we have locally. But again, the lesson learned is we need to think very carefully about what to do, not only in the future, how we participate in the treaties in Turkey, but specifically what to do in our own markets. And in accordance with the Swiss Re's prone zone, I mean, Uzbekistan is prone, zone 6 of a high earthquake, but then the prices are even lower. And the last thing I think is that lesson learned is that reinsurance in case of catastrophic events is critical to solvency of insurance companies. We have already started discussing in the region with the regulators in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan about protecting our markets with the pools, and we will be learning a lot on DASK experience. But again, I just repeat, but combined effort and combined capacity of smaller countries can also help Turkey, the Turkish insurance market in the future as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oybek. Well, what, as a reinsurer, what took my attention was the low rates. You know, the loss rates are apparently very low. Hopefully, they will pertain like that. And I hope your cooperation with the Turkish insurance sector will boost the results and develop the market in Uzbekistan, because as I know, you signed a memorandum of understanding with the Turkish Association of Insurance. Hope it will also help you develop the local markets in Uzbekistan and the whole region as a whole.
Exactly. I mean, like I mentioned, we didn't even just sign. We started acting immediately last year, and one of the reasons we already not only getting capacity support from Turkish market, which we're doing on a large scale on all of the major investment projects. But we're also trying to offer our capacity for the market.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now, after this little look at a distant market, I think now it might be time to turn back to our own issues. So, Marc Hartenbach and Arno Kopp will make a joint presentation about the catastrophes and reinsurance from a Turkish perspective. Marc, actually, you know both Marc and Arno very well, but I think I need to make a presentation for those of you who may not be familiar with them. Marc Hartenbach joined Swiss Re in 2007, and since then he has had various roles in the life and health reinsurance business with responsibility for Middle East and Turkey. And in 2023, he was appointed as the head of life and health Turkey and Iberia. So he's dedicated to the Turkish market in that respect. Marc holds a Master's of Advanced Studies degree in Corporate Finance and Insurance Management from the University of Applied Sciences, Northwestern Switzerland. And as to Arno, Arno is a senior client underwriter and responsible for Turkish P&C business for Swiss Re since 2019. He joined the Zurich-based reinsurer in 2015 and has had several positions in treaty underwriting, client management in the Mediterranean region, and innovation. He holds a bachelor's in law and master's in insurance management and law. So my question for the first round to Marc and Arno is, what is your insight on the Turkish disaster into the Maraş earthquake, your understanding of it as a catastrophe per se? I understand you will approach it from a life and health perspective, whereas Arno will share his insight from a P&C perspective. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I just head over to Arno because he's going to start talking about P&C. But before we do that, it's a great honor to be here. And we have an exciting session in front of us. And I think, Arno, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marc, and thanks a lot, Utku. So good afternoon, everyone. Real pleasure to be here. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to be here physically, but great honor for us, both with Marc, to join you for this afternoon session. So the first part is really sharing from both life and health and P&C our key observation from the tragic event that happened earlier this year. Maybe, Marc, if we can just move to the first slide, if it's possible.
Sorry.
Perfect, thank you. Nicola from Allianz will go in details really and share the key characteristics from this earthquake from a seismic perspective. But from a reinsurance perspective, just as an introduction, this earthquake is quite unique for two big main reasons. I think the first one is just the scale. And if we put the affected area into a European-led context, we are talking about an affected area which is as big as Switzerland. And I think when the event happened, that characteristic was not fully grasped at the beginning. The second characteristic, and it's again which make it quite unique, is the fact that, of course, when you have an earthquake, you have several other earthquakes recorded. But here we had two earthquakes of really, really high magnitude within the same 24 hours and within quite a close perimeter, one of 7.8 and one of 7.5 and 7.4. So that is, from a reinsurance perspective, quite unique, and that has been as well a driver of the lesson learned that we have observed from this event. So Marc, if we can just move to the next slide. Perfect. So on the P&C side, the first thing in it's always what the international press didn't take into consideration is the difference between what the insurance sector is covering and what is the actual total economical loss, and as well the physical damage, which we call the protection gap. And of course, the protection gap was important here from this event. But I think what I want to underline here is that has nothing to do with Turkey specifically. Actually, the protection gap is a challenge that the whole industry worldwide is facing. So to put into context, the protection gap in 2022 was 55%. So 55% of the losses worldwide in 2022 were not covered by insurance. And if we take the 10-year average, we are almost at 60%. So that gives a bit of perspective in terms of the general challenge that the whole industry worldwide is tackling, and where these events are absolutely crucial to get the learnings, to increase this, to reduce this protection gap and increase the insurance protection after such tragic event. We have been to Turkey around 10 days after the event, and overall, I have to say, the sector has been extremely resilient to deliver on the promise made to the policyholders. And that has started about how quick the companies were to be present on the ground, despite how big the affected area has been, but as well how quick the information has been to flow to companies and then to the reinsurers generally. And that has been, I think, done by first a collaboration across the industry, which was remarkable in terms of sharing information. So companies were able to have a first estimate without waiting for the insured to notify, because some cloud data were shared among the industry. And so therefore that enabled the insurance companies to make assumptions in terms of potential impact on their book, but as well technology generally, where we have seen the leverage of satellite data, and where AI was leveraged to estimate the damage ratio based on data. Combine all that, I think the sector has been fast. That's led the sector to be quite fast in terms of the payment, especially if we think about the residentials, which are the people which are really affected from the tragedy. If we go more specifically to reinsurance, one of the lessons learned were really on the modeling. And by modeling, I meant for many players, the results which were given by the model after the event occurred versus what was recorded in the book is quite different. And that is driven by the fact that you have two large events, so with the 7.8 and 7.5, and most of the time you model one single event. So when you have two, it's a little bit tricky to combine the two together to give an estimate. And it's a reminder a little bit of, I think, of the fact that model is a model. So per se, it's kind of wrong. And it's key to have a look on the assumptions which are taken and the level of conservatism which you want to take here. And I think the goal is here to leverage as an industry, whether it's the key stakeholders, insurance companies, brokers, house, but as well reinsurers, about the lesson learned and how we can transpose these learnings into the model going forward, especially for the renewal. One learning as well was post-loss amplification. So after an earthquake, you have an inflation on the loss, which is really driven by the event. The market didn't have a consensus about whether that will be the case in case of a large event. And it seems that now we tend to observe it after the event. So if we think going forward, and I think with Marc, we will then, and Utku and panelists discuss more in the context of the renewal, but modeling adjustment will be key, I think, for all the parties involved towards leading to get the appropriate CAT purchase for the market. And the second one is the topic of accumulation. So the first one is, of course, the geographic accumulation and the focus on Istanbul, and sometimes forgetting about the other exposure. And we saw some companies being surprised by being, having an exposure in a region which was higher than the country exposure, but as well exposure in terms of accumulation in terms of other lines of business. Casco was hit, maybe more than what we would have thought. We I would say in a certain way, engineering lines of business were not too much impacted, but there is a bit of luck where whether you have a big construction project in that area or not, but that has to not be forgotten as well in terms of potential accumulation. And as well, you know, the Turkish market is working on several currencies, and so thinking as well how a portfolio is built up in terms of underlying currency and how does it accumulate based on lines of business and based on the different regions. So that's where really the key observations that we had. I think happy then to discuss more in the context of renewal with Utku being the member of panelists. But before that, I just hand over to Marc to cover the life and health piece.
Hello? Yeah, now you can hear me. All right, cool. All right, before I gonna share the key observation from a life and health reinsurance point of view, I wanna quickly recall the life and health Katkısı mechanics before we go into details, because it works a little bit different than for P&C. So generally, life and health companies have reinsurance cover to protect them from claims above a certain claims level, either through surplus or quota share surplus combinations. The Katkısı Treaty protects the cedent's total retention in case of a catastrophic event. So cedents usually decide, according to their internal risk management and governance frameworks, their needed Katkısı retention and Katkısı capacity. Let me briefly illustrate an example of a possible life and health Katkısı treaty framework. Let's assume we have a running surplus reinsurance treaty with 50K retention per life. After assessing the total exposure within the company's retention of 50K, following Katkısı framework is going to be needed. For our example, Katkısı retention 500,000, Katkısı capacity per event 15 million, and Katkısı capacity per year 30 million. In other words, in case of a CAT event, the Katkısı treaty is triggered if the total sum insured of life claim exceeds the Katkısı retention of 500K and will be exhausted in case the total sum insured of total claims per life hit the Katkısı capacity of 15 million per event and 30 million per year. That's how a Katkısı frameworks on the life and health reinsurance works. So let me now come back to our life and health observations from the CAT event February 6. We noted a relatively moderate life and health insurance market penetration of about 2 to 3%, mainly because of the socioeconomic population characteristics of this region. Swiss Re paid, so Swiss Re Life and Health paid for a bit more than 6,000 life claims, which is about 10% of the total official reported casualties, which is 60,000. In order to respect the tremendous human tragedy with its related social economic consequences, the reinsurance industry fully supported the regulatory introduced concessions like extended coverage for long-term policies and regional premium intermission pauses up to 6 months. The waiver, that's an important one, for the death certificate, and the commitment following the AFAD, Disaster Management Authority Office, casualty reporting process. Because of the advanced digital technology in Turkey, namely the AFAD list, digital storing of insurance customers' information, which significantly eased the data match in terms of policy owner, policy beneficiary, but as well deceased, the reinsurance and insurance industry could simplify the claims verification and payment process and significantly increase the speed for claims payment, which resulted that most of the claims have been paid within 3 to 4 months, which is an extraordinary example. Needless to say, companies who had comprehensive digital admin system in place, respective claim systems, were better off, as it enabled them to monitor timely and cost efficiently their earthquake book, think about the paid claims, partially paid claims, and outstanding claims. One of the Turkish life product characteristics is the double sum at risk payment in case of an accident. For example, a life policy has a sum at risk of 100,000 in case of an accidental death. However, the paid sum at risk is 200,000. This is a very popular cover here in Turkey because for little premium, you can get a double indemnity payment. For the earthquake February 6, we saw limited number of high sum assured because of the socioeconomic characteristics which I was mentioning before in that region. Hence, the double indemnity effect was limited. However, for a large cat disaster, for instance, an earthquake or a flood in one of the big cities like Ankara or Istanbul, where the high net worth penetration is higher and the full population effect is bigger, it would trigger for sure an unsustainable result. Therefore, we strongly recommend to assess and monitor those portfolios accordingly. With regard to accumulation, we discovered another phenomenon, another Turkish product which is very popular. It's called return of premium product. The driver of such a product is not necessarily the protection of risk, think mortality. The driver of such a product is the financial attractiveness of such a savings part, as you will get back 100% of the paid premium at policy expiry date. We noted an increased exposure of such products, and as well here strongly recommend assessing and monitoring the exposure of such policies carefully and accordingly too. As mentioned, the fully committed insurance and reinsurance industry and the help of AFAD's digital technology enabled the industry to pay out nearly all life claims within 3 to 4 months. We think, however, and as part of normal due diligence, a retrospective due diligence analysis, let's say a 5% claim sample, might be very useful. According to our observation, we noted some of the companies revisited their internal risk management frameworks and decided to further bolster their retention in case of possible catastrophes, and therefore asked to increase mid in the year to increase their cat XL capacity. Well, I hope I was able to share our life and health brief observations for the first part, and let me please flag once more again the industry's resilient response to this human tragedy. Back to you, Utku.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bal, for your observations and your recommendations. I think as well have been listened to very carefully by the audience and will be taken into consideration, hopefully. So we come to Mr. Nicola Giordano. So if I may call him, Nicola is a scientist, unlike ourselves who are more
it's a background,
like
yeah.
finance professionals. Nicola Giordano is Earthquake R&D lead at Allianz SE Reinsurance, working with the group's Center of Competence for Natural Perils. Before Allianz, he extensively worked in the field of seismic engineering, participating in risk assessment projects across central Italy, California, Nepal, and Malawi. Nicola holds a PhD from Politecnico di Milano and conducted research at the University of California, Berkeley, and at the University of Bristol, UK. So I think we have the right person to ask our questions about the earthquake and the seismic aspect of the earthquake and the repercussions and the consequences. So the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. I may take the
Yes.
the remote. Thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks a lot first for inviting me. It's really an honor to be here. Yeah, so with this short presentation, I just want to give you a little bit of technical background about the earthquake, what happened. I'm sure that everyone here in the room knows, is familiar with the technical details, but just to review a little bit what happened and what's the seismic context in Turkey. So as you know, Turkey is sitting on the Anatolian block, which is a seismic plate, which is basically pushed between the Eurasian plate at the top and the African plate and the Arabian plate at the bottom. They're basically pushing everything north. And as a result, the Anatolian block moves towards the west. So in the last decades, let's say what we have observed as scientists is that the East Anatolian fault, which has a length of about 700 kilometers, has been quite quiet, let's say, compared to the North Anatolian fault. But the scientific community, and I think everyone, was well aware of the high hazard of the region. So it's not a surprise that an earthquake can happen in this region because these are mapped faults. So everyone knows that there is a quite important fault line in the region. And as you know, on February 6, we had two quite catastrophic events. So the first one was a 7.8 magnitude. The fault rupture is unbelievable. There are some satellite pictures that have measured the length of the rupture of the fault, and it goes at 300 kilometers. So it's really exceptional from a seismological point of view. And the second one was a 7.5 happening right on the same day. When you look at the impact of this event on the built environment, I would say that most of the damage was mainly referred to reinforced concrete buildings. So in the news, we have seen a lot of pictures about pancake buildings. So what is a pancake building? It's basically a building that progressively collapses. So you might have a collapse at the first floor, and then as a dynamic effect, it would collapse also on the top stories. And the problem is that these buildings that collapse in that way generate a lot of human losses. And that was one of the reasons of the high death toll of these events. And then we have seen also all sorts of typical damages that you see in, let's say, buildings that are not up to the code, up to the recent code. So you can have soft story collapses, which happens when, let's say, the ground floor of a building is characterized by openings. Let's say maybe you want to have an open space for a shop, and then as a consequence, it becomes the weak spot of the building and it triggers a dramatic collapse. And then other different, more technical observation were about the pounding of buildings. So buildings, when there's an earthquake, they shake. If they are too close, they will bump into each other, and this creates an additional damage on the structures. And then another important topic is the irregularities of the building. So the ideal scenario is to have buildings very regular, because the more the building is regular, the more is symmetric, the better it performs in a shaking. Okay? If you have an irregular building in elevation or in plant, it creates concentration of stresses in the structures, which triggers collapses and damages. And last point is on the seismic details. So the seismic details is how do I put my materials into structures in terms of reinforcement, in terms of how the column should be designed compared to the beam, for example, or to the floor. So seismic detailings are very well reflected into the building code, into recent building codes. But if you take older buildings, they might not have all these details. So as a consequence, the impact, I think this number, I took this number from several sources, but yeah, the number of fatalities is just immense, okay? And more than 160,000 buildings. I think in this morning there was a presenter talking about 300,000 buildings. So this number keep going up, and also the economic loss of direct damage. 34 billion was estimated by the World Bank in March. I think is also going up, and so the insured loss is around 5 billion. And I think we discussed about that together with the colleagues from Swiss Re. But I think one of the very important topic is what is the long-term impact on the economy. This is something that it's still unfolding, right? So we will have to see what will be the impact on this region. So moving a little bit more on the let's say my observation about this event. So the week of the event was very, very hectic for in our company, and I think for everyone, of course. And when I had the time to put together my thoughts, I wanted to see how big was this event compared to other events that I had experienced in the past or have been reading in the past. And so in this slide, I've put together the Turkey earthquake of this year, so the two footprints together. The 7.8 and 7.5, together with three, I think, events that were widely covered in the media. So, for example, the one in the middle of the L'Aquila earthquake in 2009, I think, was the most relevant earthquake in the last decades in Italy. So it made very big impact in the news and was widely covered. But also the Christchurch earthquake. So we had the contribution this morning talking about the Christchurch earthquake and how that event shaped New Zealand as well. And the last event that I want to show you is the Napa earthquake in California in 2014. And this was also quite interesting because in this area, which is basically north of San Francisco, since 1989. There has been no big earthquakes. So that was the first earthquake after 1989 that kind of shaked a little bit the insurance sector, but also the communities and the people. And so what I am displaying in this slide, the peak ground acceleration recorded at the ground. So what is the peak ground acceleration? You know that, I'm sure that some of you have experienced even a small earthquake. So you know that an earthquake is basically a time series, okay? It starts with a very little shaking, and then it amplifies, gets to a peak, and then it dissolves with time. So this peak point can be represented in terms of peak acceleration. And why acceleration is relevant? Because we know that for the Newton's law, that the acceleration multiplied by a mass generate a force. So every day we live with the gravity, okay, which is an acceleration that pushes everything to the ground. But when there's an earthquake, things changes. So this acceleration push may be in the horizontal direction. So together with having a force that push objects on the ground, so downward, you will have forces in the transversal direction. And as you can see the scale on the side, in this event, there were recording of peak ground acceleration equal or either exceeding 1. So it means at some point your building is pushed on the horizontal direction of its own weight. So this become critical not only for buildings that were built before the introduction of the seismic codes. This is critical also for new buildings. Maybe new buildings will be able to stand, will be able to save lives, because that's the goal of the building code. The goal of the building code is to save lives. But from an insurance perspective, it's a total loss anyway, because you take the people out of the building, and then you have to tear down the building, because the amount of cracks and damages that you observe, it's makes it irreparable, okay? So, yeah, this is just a perspective on the sides of the event and on the level of shaking. The second comment is, I think it's a positive comment. It was a devastating event, but I think some good things happened during the event. And one of the things that happened was the mobilization of the entire earthquake research community all around the world. So that was something that I haven't seen in other earthquakes in the past. So this is just an example of some data that were developed by NASA together with many organizations all around the world, and they built up a platform in few days providing maps of potential damage, maps of landslide, shake maps, satellite images. So these data were publicly available. Everyone could download them from the web and put them on their website and check the exposure. They were helpful. They have been used by NGOs. They've been used by the government, by insurance sector. And this was really unprecedented. So I think this is one big takeaway, that the power of the community, of the global community, it's really unbelievable. And in these cases, we have really seen the global community focusing on Turkey all together at the same time. And as a last comment, from a purely R&D perspective, I think we have also touched this topic before. So I tried to build up a timeline with the key earthquake events in Turkey, the key updates of the building code, and how the research has evolved over the last decades. And as you can see, over the last 10 years, 10, 15 years, there's been a lot of research in the earthquake, in earthquake engineering and in earthquake science for Turkey. So there are models available funded by research projects of the European Commission. There have been key projects by AFAD, and all this knowledge needs to be incorporated in our models. So there's a lot of untapped knowledge out there, and we have to make sure to have the best view of risk, because the better we understand risk, the better we can cover it.
Presentation you made and the diagrams and the maps you have shared with us really make us remember the severity of the event. And for the second round, can I start from you? Because you said something very valuable. You said there is a lot of untapped information. Mm-hmm. And you come from Italy, which is an earthquake country, if I may say so. So is Turkey. Yep. So I'm sure you have further opinions in your mind that you would like to share with us, or things that you would like to recommend to the insurance professionals of Turkey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that so when I think about earthquake resilience of a country, I think there are 5 ingredients that we can't miss. So the first one is the understanding. So to have the understanding, you need solid scientific institution, okay? Because the science is key, right? Okay. So when you have solid scientific institution, this knowledge, this understanding can be reflected into the building code, which I think is the second key ingredient for earthquake resilience. And so when we think about the building code, we need to aim to an effective building code. Effective building code means that has to be specific for the country, has to cover everything, okay? Has to cover the housing stock, has to cover the infrastructure, has to deal with buildings that have been built 30 or 40 years ago and need to be retrofitted. So it has to be complete, okay? So that's the second ingredient. The third ingredient, of course, is insurance, because the building code is going to save lives, okay? Insurance is going to cover the extra cost of the loss, okay? And so you need a solid, let's say, and a well-established insurance sector, which has to be also, of course, attractive for reinsurance companies. Otherwise, without reinsurance, you can't cope with these kind of disasters. And then, as a fourth ingredient, you need the civil protection. You need the civil protection that is able to react in case of disaster, as the financial capabilities and also the logistics to get to the area and to help the people in the time of need. And the last point, which is very crucial to me, is the awareness of the public. So the public has to play a role in the earthquake resilience. And there are very interesting cases all around the world that you have countries that have ticked all the boxes except for the awareness of the people. So if you take the example of Italy, let's talk about Italy. It ticks all the boxes. Even the insurance sector is very solid in Italy. It offers earthquake coverage, so you can buy protection. But the penetration is very low. We have about 90% protection gap in Italy for earthquake. People are aware of the risk. They know that it's an earthquake-prone country, but there's a social misconception, I think, that government will pay. So you don't have to buy earthquake insurance because government will come and pay, which is not the case. That's the main problem to me. Because if you track what happened in the last event, of course, the government helped, but the help of the government comes with time, okay? So it's not as reactive as an insurance contract, okay? And then I think people just are not aware of what really happened to the people affected by an event. And that's a problem. The second example that I want to make is about California. So California, we know, is an earthquake-prone region, and they have a system in place in California for homeowner, which is organized and set by the California Earthquake Authority. So the California Earthquake Authority makes sure that every homeowner in California can buy earthquake insurance. So insurer cannot walk away California. They have to offer something, okay? And interestingly, if you look at the statistics of the California Earthquake Authority, it was set in 1996. And at the time, the take-up rate was 30%. And that was 2 years after the Northridge earthquake, which was a big loss for the insurance sector and quite an important event for the region. Now is at 13%. So, and this, I'm trying to understand why this happened, and I can't find the answer, because from an economic point of view, California is one of the most strong economies in the world, right? And in the last 20 years, things have just improved in terms of investment, quality of life, wealth of the people, but still the people don't buy earthquake insurance. And this is really puzzling me. And I'm trying to, when I think about it, probably we should look more at other angles. And I think we had some interesting comments before about the bias that we have we try to discount the long-term benefit, okay? Or we try to be overly optimistic. The earthquake is not going to happen to me because it didn't happen in the last 10 years. So I think it's a very complex problem, and the answer is in partnership between the public sector, the private sector, and putting all the relevant stakeholders together.
Thank you very much. The things you have voiced about Italy sound very familiar to us. I think that's because of being Mediterranean. So there's, I think, a lot of lessons to learn from Italy as well. Thank you very much. So as the last question to Marc and Arno, you've shared your observations about the Turkish earthquake and protection, etc. But you know, yourselves and me, maybe we can be considered on the same boat because we're both reinsurers. But at the same time, I'm a capacity buyer, so a lot of concerns go through my mind, including the other members of the audience. So what lies ahead? What is awaiting us for the renewals? And Arno, I don't know if you can see us.
I will pass first over to Arno, and then
Arno, okay, that's a difficult
comment.
Okay.
Thank you, Marc. Yeah, thanks for the questions. So I mean, we're preparing ourselves, I think, for really special renewal, and I think everyone is aware of it. There is no doubt about it. and this earthquake has triggered, as I think, some positive measures as well by the public institutions and as well by the industry as a whole in terms of changes to address some of the lessons learned. I think from a reinsurance perspective, I think I see three things. The first one is really on the modeling aspect is really transposing these learnings into the cat protection that each company will have to do with the support of the brokers in the market. And then is to really proactively have a discussions with reinsurers, because what insurance companies experience in the market in terms of difference between modeling and actual loss, a lot of reinsurers did the same. And so reinsurers as well have worked over the summer in terms of their exposure to Turkey and their view of the risk. So I think it's really key to have active engagement with reinsurers in terms of lesson learned in terms of modeling, but as well have an understanding in terms of their view on the risk and appetite and de facto capacity, bearing in mind that I think on the capacity there might be a bit more delay in terms of the discussions because of this modeling adjustment that have to be integrated. I would as well in terms of third point is to be quite proactive. So proactive, as I said, in terms of your capacity need, understanding your panel in terms of their view on the risk and expectations, but as well in terms of what information you will provide in terms of overall accumulations that you have in your book. The market is experiencing a lot of change in terms of the minimum insurance for the facultative earthquake protections, the tariff as well on the commercial side. So it's really important to be proactive in sharing the view on risk adjusted, because the market as well is experiencing some rate increase and some insured increase. So there will be a lot of, I think, any work that you can do to support your reinsurers to understand how the portfolio has evolved will be welcome for them to really digest all these changes to then come with their view on the risks. And as well in terms of the currency, understanding a bit the underlying currency. One aspect as well that we might anticipate, and it's key as well for if we talk about the Cat XL, is a lot of most of the books on the commercial side had a split between hard currency and Turkish lira. It seems to be a trend where more hard currency policy will be purchased. So therefore, on the data you will provide on a portfolio, less of your portfolio will be impacted by the currency between euro and Turkish lira. So I think these factors are key to take into considerations. So in nutshell is really being proactive in the sharing of information and transparency, and potentially doing a bit of the extra mile this year with all the changes that the market is experiencing, which overall are positive for the resilience of the sector.
Do you have anything to add, perhaps?
So I had time to think.
Good.
So I could make my life very easy and would just say I echo what Arno said.
Okay.
But no, joking aside, I think I tried to, in the observation, already share a little bit the trends of what we have observed from a life and health, from a Click Hayat point of view. What happens? Those companies are revisiting their risk management frameworks and governance rules. That we see, because what happened mid of the year, more than a handful of companies were coming back and said, look, we need to have higher capacity. Right? I think, so what is going ahead of us, I think this trend is going to continue. The risk awareness is here, obviously. They're going to assess the retention, because life and health cut protects the retention. So the bulk business, which is in the retention, is protected. And what we are expecting is that higher capacity per year, but as well higher capacity per event is definitely going to be the trend, pretty much sure.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we can have a Q&A session if we have time. Sorularımız varsa bir 10 dakika belki sorabiliriz. Yani soru olursa lütfen kime yönelttiğimizi de belirtirsek. Evet, özür dilerim. Oradan bir hanımefendi sizden önce el kaldırdı.
My question is to Marc. For probable Marmara earthquake, do you take into consideration, because you know there can be some disability claims first, maybe partial, and later, after a certain time, the person can die a few months later. So, do you take into consideration and pricing these factors? This is my first question. The second one is probably, of course, it's a very desperate scene, but there can be some, after I'm talking about Marmara earthquake, there can be after the earthquake, contrast to the, not very similar to the Kahramanmaraş earthquake, there can be some deaths due to contagious diseases after the earthquake. So it may take time because, you know, our city's infrastructure is not very perfect, as we all know. So my estimation is that really we can face a kind of contagious disease later this earthquake. So these factors are very pessimistic when we think of them, but do you take into consideration these in your pricing, these factors? The third one is that I think we couldn't, it's very hard to predict, but the time of earthquake, whether it can be, it will be in daytime, where the working people are in the same location, exposed to the accumulation, and nighttime. You know, the second one in Kahramanmaraş, the people died in the bank's branches. It was the both of them happened. So, can I learn from your perspective the pricing? Did you take into consideration? Thanks.
Okay, I tried to summarize. It was a long question. So the first part is more related, correct me if I misunderstood, the first question is more related to disability, right? Whether we are going to consider disability in the future models or whether we have already considered disability in our modeling. If this is the question, I was not sure whether I fully understood. If this is the question, yes, we do, right? Although, as you know, the main penetration here in Turkey is mortality, right? Where I would say over the thumb, 80–90% is mortality business and maybe 80% mortality, 20% disability. So the effect is not that much. I'd like to try to answer your second question. Is more tricky. If I understood correct, you were referring to diseases which are triggered by the earthquake but coming later, right? So we are not talking about the mortalities, the casualties which are going to be reported. That's an easy one. You are talking about, okay, later we have disability cases which are triggered by the earthquake, and here most of the cases are mental disability, I guess you're referring, right? So mental as well, physical, I think it's considered. The key question is whether you can link the mental disability or the physical disability to the earthquake event. That needs to be proven.
Okay. Okay. I think Uğur Bey had a question.
Merhaba, benim sorum Arno'ya. Merhaba Arno. Sayın Utku bizi yenilemelerde ne bekliyor diye sordu. Ben de soruyu başka bir taraftan çevirip Arno'ya Türkiye Sigorta Birliği olarak reasürörlerin iştahını arttırmak, daha kolay bir yenileme geçirmek ve Türkiye'ye sağlanan kapasiteyi arttırmak için neler yapmalıyız? Sen bizim yerimizde olsan reasürörlere neler söylersin, neler anlatırsın, neler paylaşırsın?
Thank you, Gube. So if I understood correctly, your question is about how we would consider it, what are the key for a successful renewal, right? If I understood right your question, yes, okay. So I think if I would put myself from a reinsurance perspective, from our side, I think a key element of the first renewal is to be able to support our clients. So having a clear understanding about their needs and having the adequate capacity to support them because they will have some change of in the underlying book and their needs might change. So having really clearly these pictures with them, so we can provide them as well the transparency about what they can expect from Swiss Re. And I think that's a topic which is irrespective of the price, but being really transparent of how our support will look like for them. So they have this transparency because we are here, in Turkey for many, many years. So for us, it's important to show the commitment to the market. But the reinsurance market in Turkey is composed of many international players. So I think the minimum that we can do on our side is being really transparent and the level of support we can provide. And for that, for us, it's really important to have the understanding of the market needs. And it's a little bit a chicken and egg topic. So it's key for us to have this information and have proactively this dialogue with our clients and via the brokers. So I think that would be for us a key element of the success. The second one, I think, on the success is really reaching to a level where the market as a whole is feeling comfortable with the level of protection that they have for earthquake, and that really some companies, I would say, felt in the market quite comfortable with what they have, and potentially some small adjustment might be needed. Others were potentially surprised. And so for us, it's to reach, as Nicola was saying, collectively as an industry, a feeling where we gain a better understanding of the risk. Because I think with a strong understanding of the risk, that's how capacity can be deployed. And I think it's really important that as an industry, we really leverage this event during this renewal to get this extra understanding. So capacity can be secured for the market on the long term. So I think that will be really my two must wins, and potentially make the sustainable change that the market is doing. And I think the market has already started on the primary side. So it's being a source of proposition for that for the long run.
Thank you, Arno. Başka soru var mıydı acaba? Ben göremiyorum ama dolayısıyla başka soru yok diye varsayabiliriz. Zaten bu saate kadar sabırlı bir şekilde katıldığınız için teşekkür etmekten başka bir şey yok. Thank you very much. I think it's been very useful. I'm very glad that we had this panel with you. Thank you so much.
Efendim teşekkür ediyoruz. Yine bir plaket törenimiz var. Yine bir fotoğrafımız var. Sayın Türkiye Sigorta Birliği Başkanı Sayın Uğur Gülen'i sahneye rica ediyorum. Marc, please. Burada öyle yazıyor.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Uğur. Thank you.
Arnold.
Arno is joining online. Maybe Marc can take it.
Oybek.
Take another one. Okay.
Okay. Perfect. Okay.
Oybek.
Güzelmiş.
Thank you.
What a nice present.
Thank you very much.
You gave me.
Thank you.
Nikola.
Very well. Important. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Good.
Thank you.
Oops.
Ve Utku Bey.
Nice. It's personal. Very nice.
Bir de toplu fotoğraf. Uğur Bey lütfen.
I think we'll have a group picture.
All together.
Together? Okay. Okay.
Gal-